Detroit Pistons, 14 and 16-8, worst team in the league last season. Been a very, very bad and moribund franchise for a long time, and last year certainly no exception. I guess I'm going to start off by saying that Detroit, I looked the stat up and was very surprised. They have 49 fewer wins than any other team in the league in the last 5 years. Like, that's kind of alarming. They just hired Monty Williams to a 6 year, $78.5 million deal only for him to leave after 1 year or to be fired after 1 year. And with Monty, there was, sort of discussion that he didn't really want to coach after he got fired by Phoenix, but then he kind of took the money from Detroit and then coached and did a terrible job by all accounts. So, you're wasting a lot of money on him. In comes JB Bickerstaff, who hopefully can right the ship. JB does have a good track record when it comes to improving teams. Cleveland, when he joined, didn't improve that much when he joined the first season, but then improved subsequent seasons, and the win totals went up. And hopefully he can do the same with Detroit. In a similar vein, Troy Weaver was let go and replaced by Trajan Langdon. Hopefully, Trajan Langdon can fix what ails Detroit. I'm not super confident, but he was a good GM in New Orleans, so we'll see. But there is a lot to sort of fix when it comes to the Detroit Pistons. I already mentioned the wet record. It's bad. It's been bad. But, you have this sort of core that is being built, and that's good. But you've got your best player, Cade Cunningham, who got a 5 year, $224 million deal with a $269 million deal if Supermax eligibility kicks in. You've got Jalen Duren, who missed 21 games last season. Speaking of which, Cade also has a tendency to miss games. He missed in the last 3 seasons, the 3 seasons he's played, 108 games. Now, most of that was in year two of three, but still, your two, cornerstone guys, like not healthy, that does not bode well for the future. And then the sort of third guy, Asar Thompson, he has a blood clot. So there's kind of questions as to whether or not he's going to be able to play this season. Supposedly he is sort of practicing during training camp, but blood clots tend to be the end of guys' careers, and I hope not for Asar Thompson. He is a terrific player, elite defensively, does have some passing chops. There are concerns that his shooting is never going to get good enough and his offense is going to become a liability, but if he ever gets to play again and fixes it, he could be really good for a really long time. So you've got the sort of core there, but then there's sort of weird pieces on the roster. First of all, I have no earthly idea why you would give Tobias Harris 2 years and 52 million. Like, it's nuts how much money Tobias Harris has made for being pretty mediocre, especially in Philly. Like, yes, he can be a veteran presence, he can space the floor, he can play a few positions, but it's just not worth it. Speaking of other bad decisions, trading Quentin Grimes for Tim Hardaway Jr., that to me is beyond nuts and inexcusable. And I just don't get it. Like, Quentin Grimes is a guy who can he's a young player and can be built for the future. Tim Hardaway Jr. is like a throwaway guy who, yes, he spaces the floor, can give you some offense, but not a good defensive player. And if you're Detroit, you really want to be giving more minutes to the young guys than the vets. And Detroit, they picked up a few veterans. I already mentioned Tobias Harris. I mentioned Tim Hardaway. They also picked up Paul Reed, also an odd choice. Like, Reed is a good player, yes, but now you have three centers who need minutes between Duran, between Paul Reed, between Isaiah Stewart, to say nothing about playing Osar Thompson as like a small ball five. So you got to find those guys minutes. They're not really shooters. Like, Stewart can space the floor a little bit and he can play the four, although I don't like him at the four. It was tried with Detroit, didn't work. So, you really want to be playing like Harris at the four. You want to be playing like floor stretchers. And, Detroit has picked up guys who can shoot, and, now the roster has a little bit more shooting around Cade, which is great, but there is still that sort of mismatch. And then, they're a little bit thin on the wing at like the three position, which isn't like the worst thing in the world, sure, but like if I'm Detroit, I'm trying to stockpile young players. You're not ready to win now. You just aren't. And like the East is not as good as the West, but it's still deep enough and strong enough that I just don't see Detroit making a competitive playoff run for sure. Playing, I think, is very unlikely. I think more likely than not, Detroit is somewhere in that sort of 13 to 15 range, maybe 12. Like, sure, Cade Cunningham could maybe carry this team to the play-in. It's not out of the realm of possibility. He did play well against, as a member of the select team against the Olympic players last season when they did the whole training. And, he did improve last year after the All Star break in terms of efficiency and all the good counting stats. But I just don't think there's enough there. I also want to make one slight little mention that their first round pick. I know it's weird discussing a first round pick with the team that is going to be in the lottery, but their first round pick is actually top 13 protected. It's a very uncommon scenario. So technically, if their pick is 14th, which would be like a play-in team, it's going to the Knicks. I don't think they're gonna, that one extra slot is going to make a difference, but it is kind of concerning that you know, if you're trying to get to the playoffs, you're going to lose out on your pick. And I think I'd rather have the pick, especially in this deep upcoming draft. So, like, if I'm Detroit, I think it's a lot smarter to continue to build around Cade, develop the young guys, stop wasting money on bad veterans who need, who deserve minutes. Because Tobias Harris still can play in this league and still deserves minutes. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a little debatable. Paul Reed deserves minutes though, and I don't see this sort of point. So I hope at some point for Detroit's sake that Bickerstaff can fix what ails Detroit and Trajan Langdon can fix the roster. But it's not looking good, and it looks like to me that unless there are drastic changes to how Detroit does things, both on the court and off of it, Detroit's going to have another lottery year and more lottery years for years to come.